We're talking about the latest figures that was released by the National Bureau of Statistics yesterday. That's the May inflation data. Very high numbers coming in for the month of May. We saw inflation soaring to a 6-year high of 15.6%. Bismarck Rewani, an economist and, of course, Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company, joins me now to talk these numbers. So good morning to you, and thank you for coming on the program.
Good morning, Harriet. Yeah.
So between yesterday and today, when those numbers were released by the National Bureau of Statistics, there's been a lot of analysis and a lot of assessment of these numbers. Tell me, what did you think when you first saw those numbers? Already, Financial Derivatives Company had predicted and forecast an increase of for about 15.6%, actually.
Yes. The reality is that the consensus opinion amongst analysts was 14.7. It came out at 15.6. And the question is, what does this mean? The average Nigerian wants to know exactly what does this mean and how does this impact me. First of all, the inflation is defined as a persistent increase in prices at the consumer level. Now, why did it happen and why did it move so rapidly higher than expected? Two things happened in May. I think on the 13th or 14th of May, we announced the deregulation of the petroleum prices, an increase in the nominal price of petrol from 86 naira to 145. Then on the 22nd and 23rd of May, the MPC met and said, we are going to have a flexible exchange rate policy. Those two triggers affected all prices. And then you go back to what does this actually mean? We have what we call the natural rate of inflation, which is anything below 10%, right? The natural rate of inflation. And that's where we were until February 11, when it spiked up. In February, we now got into what you can call the high inflation spiral. After that, and that's where we are right now, right? And it goes all the way to about 15. After 20% or so, you now go into what they call hyperinflation. And then after 25, 30%, you get into runaway inflation like what's happening in Zimbabwe. We are not going in that direction. So, but you are having inflation at the same time as slow growth. And that's what's stagflation. Now we are almost going to have a recession at the end of this quarter. If you have high inflation and a recession, it shows you what they call negative signs, danger signs, right? One creates policy challenges, the other one creates political instability. But if you have hyperinflation and a recession, then you have a bullet in the head, right? And that's what you don't want to be. Now, what are the causes, natural causes of inflation? There's cost push, demand pull, and money supply saturation. Those are economic jargon. But the reality, when it comes to Nigeria, what happened in this case? There was scarcity of dollars. There was imported inflation. Everybody priced anything imported at a higher price. You had airfares, tickets going out of the roof. There was policy uncertainty. So if I'm trying to sell my product to you, I ask myself, if I sell this product, when will I be able to replenish it? And at what rate am I going to replenish it? Therefore, I price that uncertainty into my prices. Shortages. If I have 10 items that go into producing one product, if 9 are available and 1 is not available and that one is scarce, that pushes up the price of the final product. Then there's fear. If you're afraid that the prices are going to go higher, you even borrow money to buy. And finally, and what kills everybody is what they call speculation, where people now buy and hoard, hoping to take advantage of the new higher price. Those were the things that happened. Okay. All right.
So we still saw food prices mostly affected by import, and you talked about it, and we also saw imported inflation actually,
yes,
rising, going stratospheric, like
yes,
you mentioned it. Why is it that, in spite of the challenges that we know that we're facing as an economy, people's taste for imported goods has not reduced?
No, that's not accurate. People's tastes, at first, what happens when you're facing a situation like this is that you try to spend as much as you were spending before, but you don't have as much money. Then you begin to substitute. You go from butter to margarine. You go from custard to pap. You go from, those are the changes those are involuntary changes, which we call them substitution effect. Then after that, you deplete your savings. After you deplete your savings, you go borrowing. And he who goes a borrowing goes a sorrowing. So what is happening right now is that Nigerians are broke, but they don't understand why they are broke. Once you fill your tank in the petrol station with 15K, you have less in your pocket to go to the supermarket. Then somebody comes and borrows some money from you, and somebody takes this, and then you are not broke. But two things are very important to note. In the month of May, the effective price of petrol across the country dropped from 165 to 150. And that's significant. Deregulation fear pushed up prices, and then it corrected, and we are back to a stable environment of 150. As a matter of fact, in Ogun State, NNPC is selling below 150, 145. They're selling at 135.
Oh.
Now, but diesel, on the other hand, went from 130 all the way to 185. Scarcity, people switching, importers switching from diesel to petrol. But diesel is what powers the 911s. Diesel demand increased because of problems with power supply. And those things are driving prices. But May, by June, that is after today's announcement of the flexible exchange rate, you are going to see some reaction, exaggerated reaction, but eventually comes back. In the long run, what is going to happen is that inflation goes up again in June, but not as much as in May, right? Then it begins to correct because disposable income has reduced, and people are now price resistant. See what happened to tomatoes. Tomatoes went all the way to 45, it's now down to about 30. Beans went all the way to 27, it's now down to 15, actually down to 17,000, and going lower. Part of it harvest, part of it consumer resistance. People shifted away from that consumption.
Because a lot of people now start focusing on eating processed food since they couldn't get the fresh ones readily available. Yeah. And so we saw that happening with regards especially tomato paste. But then what next? You're projecting wage increase, agitation,
Absolutely.
more layoffs, and then of course declining disposable income.
And prices begin to decline. However, because the tariff on electricity has increased and the rainy season means that hydropower from the Kainji Dam will increase, we will see improved power supply, I think, over the next 2 to 3 months. Nothing significant, but there, it will happen. Because of forex availability at the right price, not the scammed price that we have right now, we'll begin to see availability and production. So in a perverse way, all of these adversities are going to lead to a correction. And that correction will mean that increased productivity. Once output increases and money supply stays constant, you begin to see inflation begins to decline. That is a natural path of inflation. But the problem is that people are afraid, and speculators are going to be wiped out of the market. If you speculate, you'll lose. So the first thing that's going to happen, and I know you're going to talk about the exchange rate policy, is that the moment they announce the exchange rate policy, people in the power market will go to 380 and all of that. But then within 4 or 5 days,